Searching for the perfect gift idea for that hard-to-buy person on your list? The Allbirds Wool Runner is a natural fit. The Wool Runner is super cozy, super comfy, and super giftable. It's made with ZQ-certified merino wool, a naturally cozy material that offers next-level comfort and a lower environmental impact. The cushioned midsole and versatile design offer all-day comfort in a classic style you can wear every day, even in a winter wonderland. And its fully machine-washable construction makes it easy to keep your shoes looking like new. Allbirds shows off the Wool Runner's carbon footprint right on the shoe so you can see the difference for yourself. On top of that, they actually offset that carbon footprint to 0, making the Wool Runner completely carbon neutral, so you can stay cozy and tread lighter on the planet. This holiday season, give tidings for comfort and coziness with the Allbirds Wool Runner. Discover your perfect pair at allbirds.com. That's ALLBIRDS.com.
This is Dream Power Radio, the place where your dreams turn into reality. Here is your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Dream Power Radio. This is the place where we talk about dreams, both daytime and nighttime dreams, and how you can use them to make the internal shift to a life you love and rediscover the truth of who you really are. One of the worst feelings a person can encounter is waking up from a nightmare. Anyone who's had one knows what I'm talking about. You feel a bit disoriented or scared or even terrorized. Often the experience makes it hard to go back to sleep, leaving you restless and irritable the next day. Most of the time, although these nightmares are distressing, they often fade from our memories and we go on with our lives. But then there's a category of nightmares that's even worse, that leaves the dreamer in a state of extreme anxiety and are often very debilitating. They're brought on by real trauma that gets relived in our dreams. And they're the subject of a fascinating new book by my guest, spiritual psychotherapist, teacher, and dreamer, Linda Yael Schiller, who's been a frequent guest on our show. Her book, PTSD Dreams, delves not only into the causes of these nightmares, but also offers ways to transform these terrifying visions into hopeful and life-affirming stories. So let's take a look at that now. Welcome to Dream Power Radio, Linda.
Thank you, Debbie. Good to be back with you.
Oh, it is my pleasure too. Well, Linda, you know, we all dream. Whether we remember our dreams or not, we do all dream. And there's an emotional content to all of our dreams. But what is the cutoff point between what we consider just a dream and what we consider a nightmare?
It's a good question to start with. So what I call the emotional narrative of the dream is the emotional storyline that goes along with the narrative storyline. So in our dreams, we have a story, we have events, we have pictures, we have objects. So those are the things that happen in our dreams. And accompanying them, we have various emotions. And our emotions can be different in the beginning, the middle, and the end of our dreams. A pleasant dream is going to be one that has a positive or at least just neutral emotion. So if in your dream, your feelings are something like, I feel happy, I feel excited, I'm delighted, that's a positive dream. If your feelings are, oh, this is kind of interesting, this is sort of a neutral emotional state, but you're curious, you're interested, that's a regular dream too. Then we start to shift into the difference between what we'd call a bad dream or a nightmare. And you did a great job in your introduction, Debbie, delineating the difference between the two. A bad dream might be something we wake up feeling upset, irritated, a little angry, a little annoyed, a little worried. But it doesn't linger too long. We pretty much kind of move on from it. We go about our day, and it doesn't affect our waking life that much. We might say, wow, that was a scary dream, or that was a weird dream, and what's for dinner? Right? We just kind of move on. Nightmares are the ones that linger. They're the ones that wake us up. And in our memory of our dream, we have a strong negative emotion. Usually it has to do with fear and anxiety. Sometimes it has to do with anger, or disgust, or terror, extreme grief, any long, big emotion. And the key with bad nightmares is we can't shake them. Sometimes they're one-off and we have it one night and it's like, oh my God, this was terrifying. And then it lingers with us, but we don't have it again. Not infrequently, however, and many of your listeners, I'm sure, can resonate with this, we have repetitive or recurring nightmares where either the dream itself or the themes or images of the dream just keep coming back over and over and over. And in the book, one of the references I make is it's like Groundhog Day, where every day this character is waking up and it's the same day all over again. And he's got to learn a lesson. He's got to do something different in his life before he can get out of that repetitive Groundhog Day of over and over and over again. And that's kind of what's going on when we have ongoing repetitive nightmares. There's something in our life that has scared us, that has traumatized us. It might be something in our personal life. It might be something in our family dynamics. It might be something larger in our global environment or other times or other dimensions. But we're carrying this trauma and we haven't finished working it through. These are the nightmares that wake us up and linger until we have learned what we need to learn in a way that serves our highest purpose and are able to do something reparative in our life to be able to move on.
Okay, well, you call it your book PTSD Dreams. So are all nightmares PTSD dreams, or is there a differentiation between that as well?
Sure, that's a good question. So the way I actually call the book is PTS Dreams, it's sort of a play on words. And the subtitle is Transform Your Nightmares from Trauma through Healing Dreamwork. So implied in that is that all nightmares are not from trauma. Some nightmares are developmental in nature. There are periods of time in our lives, particularly when we're kids, when having nightmares is kind of just a normative part of child development. So when we're a little person, everybody in our life is bigger than us, and we don't have very much power and control because the big people, right, the adults, tell us what to do. So it's normal and normative for children to feel helpless or feel disempowered or feel like they don't have self-efficacy because, in fact, they don't until they get older and start being able to have more control of their own lives. So that's one example of a nightmare, types of nightmares that are not necessarily caused by trauma. The monster under the bed or in the closet kind of a dream. So that's one. Another kind of nightmare that might not be caused by trauma are those that are hormonally affected. Pregnant women in particular report wild and crazy dreams from the hormones going through their body during pregnancy. Any point in time in our life, with women certainly with menstruation and with menopause and perimenopause, but men too have fluctuating hormonal cycles. That can be a source of a nightmare. We could be reacting to something from our external environment. You ate some food that didn't agree with you. That's the old joke, but it's actually true. You could have a nightmare because you are literally not digesting something you ate properly, as opposed to metaphorically not digesting something that happened to you. I'll give you one example of that. Many years ago, I had a nightmare where there was an earthquake happening. This was an uncommon dream for me. I tended, luckily, not to have nightmares, and I'd never had a nightmare about an earthquake before. But I woke up and it was, quite distressing. And as I woke up, I realized that right outside the window of my bedroom, there was a jackhammer digging up the street. And my dreaming self interpreted that as an earthquake, and that was my nightmare. So it wasn't anything about trauma or anything even that ever happened to me. It was something from the outside that infiltrated my dream life.
And like you said, those kinds of dreams, may upset you in the moment, but you go on with your life from it. When I think about post-traumatic stress, my first awareness of it was with Vietnam vets, and we had to deal with that. But you don't have to be a vet to have trauma or anything of that nature. So talk to me about some of the traumas that you've dealt with in your practice and how you've been able to help those people alleviate the pain of the nightmares.
Thank you, Debbie. I always know when someone has read the book and has really grokked it, because you ask such good questions. I can tell you've read it and understood the point of the book. You're right that actually in the 60s, in that era of Vietnam and Vietnam vets, that's when the term PTSD was actually coined. And there were several reasons why these Vietnam vets came home with more trauma and developed into a whole disorder or syndrome than vets from other wars. And there are two main factors two or three main factors that I'm thinking of that differentiate it. One was the age of the soldiers that were sent to war. During World War II, the average age of the soldier was 22 years old. During the Vietnam War, the average age was 18. Developmentally, we are not as mature at 18. Our brains have not fully formed as much as when we're in our 20s. Neuroscience tells us that our brains, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, actually doesn't come fully online until we're about 25 years old. So the farther we are from 25, the less full access we have to our thinking brains. So the Vietnam vets, A, were younger. B, the war conditions themselves were extremely difficult in jungles and swamps and hidden attacks. It wasn't like in the olden days when one line of soldiers would line up here and another line of soldiers would line up there, and you knew who was shooting at who. This was, trench and guerrilla warfare. And then the third difference, and this is very important when we're talking about trauma, is how the vets were received back into society when they came home. For other wars, there were parades, there were sticker tapes, there were cheers. The Vietnam vets were often reviled and spat at and being told that they were terrible people for going off to this war. So their return home did not validate their experience of defending their country. So all these three things combined to form this new constellation of symptoms that we now call PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. So in addition to, as you said, this is more directly related to your question, war trauma, there's lots of different types of trauma. And in my work as a trauma therapist and my work as a dream worker, I've looked at several different types of trauma and worked with a lot of people with the different types of trauma over the years. There are two types that have been around for a while, and I added a third in the book. The two types that I learned about in terms of doing trauma treatment are personal or private and public trauma. So public trauma is something that happens in view of the public in the public sphere, like someone going off to war, like a natural disaster, like a car accident. It's very clear something bad happened to you or the people around you, and nobody's questioning whether or not you're telling the truth. Nobody's saying did this or did that happen. And generally speaking, after that traumatic event, you are received back into society with support and resources and food and shelter and whatever you need following that disaster. So that's public trauma. Private trauma is the kind of trauma that happens behind closed doors in the privacy of homes or schools or religious institutions or organizations where we don't see it. And it's kind of my word against your word. These are the kind of things like sexual assault and physical abuse, battering, emotional abuse, neglect, various family dynamics and substance abusing family systems. And we can find these types of private traumas both in family systems themselves. And, unfortunately, our news media is full of things that happen to kids at school or in the workplace or in an elevator or in a religious institution. And then what you've got is an additional layer of trauma, which is how the person reporting the trauma or being the victim of the trauma is received by other people in their life. Are they believed? Do they get to a safe place? Can they even report it? And what happens when they do? So the way the friends, family, and support teams react and respond is going to be a really important part of the healing process from the trauma. So those are the two types that we've known about for a long time. The third type that I identified as in the last several years is, for want of a better phrase, I've been calling ambiguous public trauma. This is traumatic events that happen in full view of the general public, possibly even put up on our cell phones and filmed and videoed, and yet people still aren't agreeing as to what really happened. Did that police person use violence or not in subduing a suspect? Was that an abusive comment or not when someone swore at another person publicly and bullied them? We have difference of opinions, even in the light of what seems like sometimes unambiguous facts. We have different perspectives, differences of opinion. And then we get the merging, if you will, of these two categories of the public and the private. where even though it was public and we think, oh, there's no question here, we get the ambiguity and disagreement about what happened, which adds the whole layer then of shame, not believing ourselves, not being believed by others, that complicates our healing and recovery.
Well, Linda, you have done a great job in explaining the causes of trauma and the nightmares that result from them. And when we get back from our break, we're going to talk about some possible solutions.
Great.
We are talking about PTS Dreams with Linda Yael Schiller, and we'll be right back.
When is a car not a car? When it shows up in your dreams. Cars are one of the most common dream symbols. If you don't know why you're dreaming about cars or any image, it can leave you confused or scared. But that dream could be a solution to a pressing problem, or an insight into a solution that's been bugging you for years. Go to my website and sign up for a complimentary discovery session, and I'll help you understand why a dream is a terrible thing to waste. Go to thedreamcoach.net for more information.
Welcome back to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman.
Yes, welcome back to Dream Power Radio. I'm your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman, and we're talking about nightmares with Linda Yael Schiller. Well, Linda, just like there are antidotes to poisons, there are possible treatments for dealing with the devastating effect of these PTSD nightmares or PTS dreams, which are nightmares. You have some techniques that you use with some success. One of them is called the party system. So can you tell us about that?
Sure. There are three sort of orientations that I have in working with dreams and nightmares. And the first I would call the integrated embodied approach. And the hallmark of this sort of overarching approach is I really do believe in not only the possibility, but the inherent potential that each of us has to heal. And I borrow this philosophy, both it's something I believe personally, and it's from a school of psychological thought and practice called ADEP, which is Accelerated Experiential Dynamic Psychotherapy. What it means is we all have the power to heal, and that our systems are hardwired to healing. We are not meant to stay wounded and traumatized. Our systems want to move into a homeostasis of equanimity and tranquility. So what can we do to help our systems go in the direction that they actually prefer and want to go in anyway? And so that takes us into various ways and methods of working both with the nightmares and then the traumas that generate the nightmares in the first place. So the Pardes method that you mentioned is based on the Kabbalistic reading of the Torah. And the word Pardes itself is a word that means simply orchard in Hebrew, and it is an allegory for the Garden of Eden. It also is an acronym, and the acronym with the four letters in English of P, R, D, and S are what we use when we read the holy books like the Torah and the Talmud, and we read with an ever-increasing layer of depth and inquiry. We can do the same thing with our dreams, because our dreams are multi-determined. And that means they don't mean just one thing. There are multiple layers of simultaneous truths in our dreams. And this system of using the Pardes is one system. There are many, but this one I put together that helps us get to these layers. So the P stands for, in Hebrew, the word pshat, which means simple. And that's the storyline. That's the dream as we dreamt it, what happened in the dream, and possibly the emotions that go with the dream as well. The next layer of depth is R, which in Hebrew is for the word remez, and remez means hint or hinted at. So this next layer is when we put our attention on the dream and we start to get initial associations like, oh yeah, I dreamt about this, but it's kind of reminding me of that. And oh yeah, I see this connection with what happened in my life yesterday and what I dreamed about. That's the R, the remez layer. So there's some immediate ahas and connections with our life. The next layer, D, is for drash, which comes from the Hebrew word lidrosh, which means to chase after or to pursue. And also, if we go to a synagogue and the rabbi or the cantor is giving an interpretation of what the Torah portion means that day, it's often called the drash, which is the deeper layer of interpreting. Okay, we just read about, let's say, Joseph having his dreams, but let's unpack that and look at the deeper layer of meanings. And here's where we look at symbol and metaphor and other texts and deeper associations. And we do this in the dream world as well, using multiple methods of dream work. There are many methods. We could go on for hours, but we don't have the time for that. But this is where we use all those methods of dream work, Jungian active imagination and Gestalt and dream re-entry and so on. And the final layer, the S in Pardes, is for Sod, and Sod means secret or hidden or the mystery. So this final layer is the transpersonal, mystical layer of our dreams, where we can be connected with other times, other places, other dimensions, and we can connect with departed loved ones, we can connect with spiritual guides and angels, and where we can connect with dreaming, not just for ourselves, but for the world as well. Actually, in a dream last night, this is actually true. I dreamt about, we know about the concept of tikkun olam, and tikkun olam is repairing the world. So I was thinking, so what we start with is tikkun nefesh, which is repairing the soul. So first we repair our own soul, and once we've done that, we can move out into tikkun olam and repair the world. And that's kind of the trajectory I see in doing work with nightmares. When we are able to heal ourselves, we then have the resources and capacity available to bring that healing both out into the world we're living in now and to bring it forward and backward in time to heal our lineage as well.
Mm-hmm. And the good thing is that this technique can also be used for regular dreams, not just nightmares.
Absolutely. That's right.
Yes. So that is a good thing. Another one of your techniques that you use is called the Gaia method.
That's right.
How does that work?
This one I developed specifically for working with nightmares. And Gaia is on purpose, a play on the Gaia principle of the feminine, earth-based, sentient reality of the earth we live on. But again, it's an acronym, and the Gaia method stands for Guided Active Imagination Approach. And this style of working I developed based on Jungian active imagination and best practice trauma treatments. So much of the work here is based on my training and experience with modalities such as EMDR, dealing with trauma, a lot of different energy psychologies like TAT, and what's colloquially called tapping, the EFT, emotional freedom technique. And the core of the Gaia method is safety first, safety first, safety first. Because I've seen way too many people who get re-traumatized either by the nightmare itself or by people asking them questions or encouraging them to dive deep into the nightmare before they feel safe enough to do so. Because we know when we're dreaming, there's no differentiation that our brains make between what's really happening in our outside world and what's really happening in our dreaming minds. So for all extents and purposes, whatever we're dreaming is actually happening. So we want to be very careful to approach the dream with respect and caution.
I was actually very impressed in reading about that, because it never really occurred to me that you really have to create that safe space to even start talking about it, let alone working with it. Mm-hmm. So yes. Mm-hmm. So yes. So
thank you.
Continue on.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. Right. And this is a premise, right, that I put together in this method from doing years and years of trauma treatment, is that we have to start with safety. I've had people over the years who came to me who said, I had this nightmare, and my friends or my colleagues said, oh my God, I think you're having a mental breakdown or a psychotic break. I think you better go to the hospital and go to the ER. And it's like, oh, well, first let's get you grounded. Let's get you safe. Let's create, a bubble of light. Let me orient you to the room, and let's form a little bit of a relationship here. And then tell me the dream. And then let's see whether or not we think you need to go to the hospital or not. And never in all my years of work did I think that someone was having a psychotic break from the dream they reported. Now, this is not to say that couldn't happen, but that's the zebra, right, in the crowd of horses. That's not what we're looking for. That's not the regular nightmares. So in the Gaia method, what we start with, there's step 1 and step 2, and then the new addition that I put in this book from my previous book is there's a bridge between the two as well. So in step 1, before we start working on the dream, I first ask the dreamer, what do you need to feel absolutely safe while we're working on this dream? before we even touch the dream. So we really go through real and imaginary people, pets, objects, places, garments, guides, anything that helps them feel safe and connected. That relational connection is really critical for many people to feel safe. So this is a much longer process because I know we only have a few more minutes today, but we spend as long as we need to on setting up safety first outside the dream before we even go looking at the dream. Then the next step, the bridge, before we look at the dream itself or before we go into the dream to do the work, I say, now that you have all your safety around you, take a peek inside the dream from the outside. See if there's anything inside the dream that helps you feel safe and protected that you might not have noticed the first time round, or you might have neglected to report. And often people can look back in the dream and say, oh, yeah, there's that little gnome in the corner. And now that I look at him, he actually is a guardian for me. I don't realize that before. I say, great, let's bring the guardian into the gnome into our posse as well. Or, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you, when I was walking, I had my dog with me and my dog is wonderful. Great. Let's make sure we remember that your dog is with you. Once we've got the safety outside and the safety from looking into the dream, then we go into the dream with all of the protection needed to work with the dream material, including confronting the things that scare us, including having the protection to face our monsters, to turn around and confront what we were running from, to ask questions when we need to ask without getting re-traumatized in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final goal, I know we're almost out of time, but just to throw this in, is the orientation also is that even in a nightmare, is there's going to be a gift, at least one. So we're looking, our orientation is to find these hidden gifts that are somewhere buried in the rubble of the dream. That's our intention, right? Our kavana is to find out what's the information, what's the message, what are we supposed to know or do in our lives as a result of having figured out what this dream has come to tell us.
Yeah, no, you're right. I do have a million more questions to ask you, but we are getting out of time. So there's just this one final one.
Sure.
How can people find out more about you and the book?
Oh, thanks, Debbie. So the book, PTS Dreams, Transform Your Nightmares from Trauma Through Healing Dreamwork, will officially be available on September 8th, but it's been available for pre-order for several months now. And you can get it through the publisher, which is Llewellyn Worldwide Publishing. You can get it from bookstore.org, which is an organization for indie bookstores. It's an umbrella organization if you want to support independent bookstores. You can, of course, get it on Amazon. You can get it anywhere books are sold, really. Barnes & Noble, Target carries it, all sorts of places. And if you want to learn more about the book, I have a website for the book called PTSDreams.com. And if you go to that website, it'll give you a summary of the book. You can see the endorsements people have given me and see other events like this one that I have been doing both over the last few months and upcoming.
Well, Linda, thank you so much for being on Dream Power Radio today.
You're very welcome, Debbie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, we've been speaking with dream expert and spiritual psychotherapist, Linda Yael Schiller. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. If so, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Until next time, this is Debbie Spector-Weissman saying, sweet dreams, everybody.
You've been listening to Dream Power Radio with your host, Debbie Spector-Weissman. For more information on Debbie or to sign up for her newsletter, go to dreampowerradio.com. This has been Dream Power Radio on the amazing Women and Men of Power Network, the world's leading positive programming network, powered by Raven International.